Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm here from Portland, Maine, in the United States, and so excited to be here. I specialize in empowering individuals, couples, and organizations to adopt neurodiversity affirming practices and attitudes at work and at home. And I've already watched some of these wonderful presentations and know that many of you, like me, are neurodivergent and raising neurodivergent children and part of neurodivergent families and neurodiverse workplaces. So I'm personally dyslexic, ADHD, autistic. I also include trauma in the neurodivergence umbrella, which I'll get to. And my entire family is neurodivergent. And so the reason why I got into this work was to understand them better, the people I live with, the people I love. And then that started to translate into bringing this awareness and sensitivity into the workplace, because at work, we're humans who also have homes and families and relationships. And I think that's an important component to talk about. So as I mentioned, in the neurodivergent umbrella, there's so much included, and this graphic even does not include everything. But I do want to mention trauma on there, because I believe that when we hear the statistic that 30% of people potentially are neurodivergent, I think that's a gross underestimation. And I believe that the incidence of neurodivergence is far higher, especially when we do honor trauma as a neurodivergence, but also as we continue to learn about different neurotypes, learn that diagnosis has been quite inaccessible, too expensive, not available to all people. So as more people become diagnosed, and as self-diagnoses and self-discovery becomes more honored, I think, and people feel safe disclosing, I think we're going to find that more people than 30% are neurodivergent. I might even say that the majority of people are neurodivergent, which will bring me later to a concept called neuronormativity, which we'll be talking about. But I do also want to mention, in regards to neurodiversity versus neurodivergent, every team by nature is neurodiverse, because neurodiverse is just it consists of all different thinkers. Each person, all humans, neurodivergent and neurotypicals, are wired differently and have distinct and unique brains. So we talk about our society and our culture as being neurodiverse, but individuals as neurodivergent. And I think those two sometimes get confused. And often I'll hear somebody say neurodiverse individuals, which isn't grammatically correct, because just by nature, everyone is already neurodiverse. So I just wanted to bring that up. And also the language of neurodiversity from a neurodiversity affirming framework is far less pathologizing and more strength-based. So I hope in today's presentation we can delve into that new, more strength-based and affirming languaging more. You've probably heard this quote before. You've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, as is true. You've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. I love the word nuance, because I believe that all of us are completely nuanced with our different neurotypes, but also our upbringing, our lifestyle, what we've chosen for work, who we are and our personalities. And I think if we can start to honor the nuances and the uniqueness of all of us, rather than focusing so much on the labels or even the particular neurotypes, that it'll become a more neuro-inclusive community, neuro-inclusive society, workplace, home, everything. So when we talk about the traits of somebody who is, let's say, for example, ADHD or autistic, I think often it is pathologized. And I'm going to kind of go quickly through these initial slides, because so much of this has been covered already. But I do want to mention the terminology in, let's say, for example, ADHD alone. ADHD has the words deficient and disorder in the label. And so already that's pathologizing. So for somebody to say, I am ADHD, or even I have ADHD, it's leading with this disorder and this deficit. I hope someday that the label has changed and the terminology has changed. With autism spectrum disorder, now there's a reframing to autism, autistic adult, and kind of taking out the disorders, showing spectrum or autism. And I think that the more we can start to listen to the language we use internally and externally, that will start to shift our mindset, our attitudes, and then ultimately our practices at work and home. So, as we all know, because everyone here is neurodivergent, I'm sure watching and presenting, there's so many strengths and challenges, but there's some nuanced challenges that show up in almost every client I see. And I want to mention them because, of course, it impacts how we uh, are at work and at home. And some of these challenges, if there's more sensitivity and awareness around them, I think could make for a far more effective, safe, comfortable, easeful, fun, and productive work environment. So I want to note the sensory overload issues because, and it's often misdiagnosed as anxiety. Sometimes we see somebody and we say, oh, they're very anxious or even angry, when it's actually sensory overload. So with sensory issues, there's often hypersensitivity and hyposensitivity. And this hyper and hyposensitivity can change each day. One day I could be very sensitive to the sound of chewing or the sensation of lights or the sound of motors. And the next day, not so much, which can be very confusing. But it depends on what other sensory overload I'm experiencing. And perhaps you could relate to this. If it's very hot outside, you're also going to be sensitive to perhaps the lights or the sounds or the textures that you come across throughout the day at work and home. So notice how it shifts, and maybe explain to the people you live with and work with how it's different every day, because it's nuanced and because it depends on what other sensory impact we have at the moment. Task avoidance and procrastination. I really love digging into this topic because I believe procrastination is an emotional regulation issue, not a time management issue, not an avoidance specifically for the task, but I believe we're avoiding the emotion that arises when we do the task. So for example, so many of us have the task on our to-do list of cleaning our office. But in the office, there's doom piles, there's unread books that we've purchased, there's certifications we haven't completed. So there might be a lot of shame and overwhelm within these piles. That's what we're procrastinating on. That's what we're avoiding. Or somebody who wants to clean out their clothes closet. There might be shame about overspending, or body shame. Somebody who wants to clean out their basement. Maybe there's letters from past lovers, or grief about people they've lost, and items that their grandmothers passed down to them. And they know that they're going to come up against these barriers, these emotional barriers. And so often the procrastination is to procrastinate and avoid the emotion that will arise when doing the task. And once you have that awareness, like, oh, I'm not just procrastinating on cleaning my office, I'm procrastinating on facing the maybe shame or overwhelm that arises. So I think that awareness and that shift really helps. Imposter syndrome and self-doubt comes up every day, no matter how competent the people I'm talking to are, no matter how quote unquote high functioning or high masking they are, it's still an internalized self-doubt that arises. And so I like to reframe imposter syndrome as you're trying something new, right? You're taking a risk. Your brain, when it's braining, and your brain's job is to keep yourself safe, to keep you in the familiar, and familiar feels safe. So anytime you try something new, your brain is going to resist. Your brain might try to self-sabotage you and tell you to stay small, stay quiet, don't try the hard thing because we don't know what's going to happen. And that's just the nature of trying something new. So of course you would feel some anxiety or self-doubt. how else could you possibly feel if you're trying something new? So if we know that our brain wants to keep us safe in the familiar, in the comfort zone, and we know that our brain will likely sabotage us and try to keep us playing small or not taking the risk, then we can say, okay, brain, thank you so much. Thank you for braining. Appreciate the work you do. Love you. And I'm going to stay the course onward. I'm going to do the thing I want to do because it matters to me. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I don't love the name. I don't love the dysphoria at the end. I think most everybody is sensitive to rejection, but I do believe that neurodivergent people, because of our past actual real traumas, do have a higher sensitivity to rejection. And there's a cycle that I always point out, and it begins with trauma of that real rejection, judgment, criticism, the expectations that are real, that have happened in our past. And that turns into people pleasing because, of course, we want to fit in. We want to avoid the conflict. We want people to like us. We want to do well. And so we start people pleasing. We do too much. We say yes to things. We go beyond our abilities. We go beyond our capacity. And then we burn out, even burning out on things we love, even burning out on subjects that we adore or research that we adore. We can burn out. And then when we burn out, we often shut down. And then there's actual rejection. Maybe we lose a job. Maybe we lose an opportunity. Maybe we lose a relationship. Maybe all of a sudden we can't work because we're too burnt out. So if we notice, it's about awareness. If we notice the cycle of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and we know that we can interrupt it at any time. Unfortunately, we can't interrupt the past traumas if they've already happened, but we can certainly interrupt that between the trauma and the people pleasing to people please less. And between the people pleasing and the burnout, to notice the signs of your burnout that are usually in your body, how you feel in your body when that burnout begins. And this has been talked about a lot today, so I will just briefly say that obviously neurodivergence is often an invisible disability that we can't see, and that women and girls in particular have been under-researched and misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed, and for many, many women and girls, in particular with ADHD, the hyperactivity is internal. And this isn't necessarily for only girls and women, but I'm just going to say that in general, what I find when women are misdiagnosed or later in life diagnosed, when their children are diagnosed, it often happens. It turns out that they've been, highly effective at work and school, masking greatly, and the hyperactivity is inside. It's internal, ruminations, spinning thoughts, intrusive thoughts, perfectionism, eating disorders. So these are the symptoms that are not only invisible, but aren't even talked about. And I think we're starting to get this awareness, but I think it's really important for people at home and the workplace to notice that it could look completely different certainly from the stereotypes, but from really what we've always learned about ADHD. And I will say that I think in so many of my neurodivergent, not just ADHD clients, that the ruminations and intrusive thoughts are a daily challenge. And that mindset work is something that we work on every day. Like we wake up and we revert to our default software of who am I and what am I doing and do I know anything and why do I have this work and do I deserve to have this work and do I deserve to have this life? We almost wake up with a default of not feeling ready for the world or not feeling enough. And the beginning of our day needs to be this basically practice and discipline of starting a morning routine that allows us to get back into our body and our self-worth and our confidence and regulating our emotions, and then entering the world with that sense of deep worth and knowing. But it is a practice. Masking, I believe when we mask, we are emotionally regulating other people. We don't want to cause trouble. We don't want to inconvenience. We don't want to cause conflict. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want people to not like us. We want to fit in. We want to get the job, keep the job. We want to get promoted even for the job. So often we mask up. We cover up our desire to stim. We cover up our desire to put our head down on the desk, as the previous speaker talked about. We don't sit and move in our bodies as we would feel most comfortable. There's so many ways we mask and so many reasons we mask, of course. But when we mask, it covers up our true selves. It doesn't allow the people we're working with or living with to know us fully. And then we start to feel really lonely and unseen, unheard, unknown, misunderstood. And so that when we do feel that we're fitting in or accepted, but for our mask, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like a compliment and an actual acceptance and belonging, because we know we're not showing our true selves. Now, I will say that often we have to mask to stay safe, depending on the environment or the culture we're in. And sometimes we mask to get the job. Sometimes we mask to keep the job. Sometimes we mask to handle or manage a social event. And sometimes we mask because we haven't learned the ways to unmask. So when we unmask, it's always good to start unmasking within ourselves, start to realizing, like, what do I really want? What would I wear, want, eat if nobody else were around me? If nobody I loved would get hurt, what would I truly want to do or say? Including yourself. If nobody you loved, including yourself, would get hurt, what would you want to do or say? If nobody would be inconvenienced, if nobody would be in conflict, what would you want to do or say? How would you want to move? And that starts to allow us to kind of tap into who we really are. And then we start to slowly reveal and heal and unmask with the people who hopefully unconditionally love us, with the people we feel safest with, and then ultimately expanding that to our communities and our workplaces. Real quickly, so many of the presenters have beautifully talked about functioning labels. I will say that I don't love the functioning labels, high functioning, low functioning. I've been talking about functioning labels as high functioning society, not high functioning people. Like, let's put it on the societies. We have a low functioning society that does not accommodate neurodivergent people. So it's a low functioning society, not low functioning people. So many have already talked about the social versus medical model, but I will just say very quickly that rather than saying, what are we going to do with all these neurodivergent or quote unquote disordered people who don't fit into our society, it should be, what can we do to change our society and our culture that allows everybody to have a sense of belonging? So many people say, I'm a safe person. This is a safe space. This is a safe business. We can't actually guarantee safety because everybody's coming in with their nuances, their backgrounds, their childhood traumas. And so rather than saying this is a safe place, can we say, this is a compassionate space. This is a brave space. Our intention is to create a safe space. But when you say this is a safe space, I'm a safe person, and somebody doesn't feel safe, let's say at work, then there's even more shame. Oh, they said this is a safe space. I still don't feel safe. What's wrong with me? So watching our language around safety, the word safe. Okay, neurodiversity-affirming practice. I know this graphic has a lot in it. Many of these concepts I'm sure you know and have learned before, but one that I want to kind of pull out is neuronormativity, because as we start to work with this more strength-based neurodiversity-affirming practice paradigm, when we talk about neuronormativity and unpack it, we're talking about rejecting it and also reframing this. Neuronormativity is a set of norms, standards, and expectations reinforced throughout society. These norms center a particular way of functioning, including thinking, feeling, communicating, and behaving. And this way of functioning is seen as the superior, the right, the correct way. You should think this way. You should act this way. You should feel this way. You should talk to people this way. You should look at people this way. We've all experienced this. So we need to start rejecting and reframing neuronormativity in order to make room for all of our ways of functioning. To stop labeling individuals as having deficits and disorders would be a really great start. And hopefully you can see the slide, but if not, for those that are listening, neurodiversity affirming practice, the core principles as well as rejecting neuronormativity include honoring intersectionality, respecting autonomy, validating difference, pursuing competence, reframing expectations, promoting self-advocacy, prioritizing lived experience, nurturing positive self-identity, adapting systems and environments, and honoring all forms of communication. And I do want to make a quick note about prioritizing lived experience. I also want to say, as the previous speaker did, honoring self-diagnosis, honoring those who are self-discovered in their neurodivergence. Formal diagnoses are just not financially or energetically within everybody's ability or capacity to access, and believing people. Just believing people. If they identify as neurodivergent, I believe our lived experience, self-diagnosis, and assessment should be honored and believed. The fastest growing reasons for people leaving a job are culture, employee fit, and feeling psychologically unsafe and poor communication. So I think psychologically unsafe is a really important concept. And I think a lot of it comes into down to stigma, because I think a lot of neurodivergent job applicants do not get hired because of general stigma associated with neurodivergence. And then their skill set and qualifications just are dismissed based on these stereotypes. And even when they're hired, often the stigma remains. And so neurodivergent employees might be kind of on edge all the time and feeling that psychological unsafety in the workplace, continuing to worry about saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, fearing they're going to lose their job, and feeling judged. So I think we should attempt to create as much as we can psychologically safe spaces, which include, as the previous speaker said, asking like, what can I do to support you? Simple as that. Not even delving into what is your diagnosis. You don't need to ask that. It's how can we support you best? Hiring and retaining neurodivergent employees. I think company culture is defined by action or inaction, not policy. So you could say you're neurodivergent friendly and neurodiversity affirming, but do your actions or inactions show otherwise? So the policies might be on paper, but the implementation is often lacking. And that would include something like anti-bullying policies, making sure that somebody is enforcing the policies, making sure that these policies are clear, the consequences to somebody who is bullying, if that is the case. And then knowing the disability rights, knowing reasonable accommodations, having this be part of the conversation is very important. Firing resumes and hiring people, I think, is a great concept. Because resumes just don't show the whole story. It's on paper very, of course, two-dimensional. We all have a common thread throughout our life. So many neurodivergent people say, I have gaps in my resume. This looks scattered. This resume doesn't even show who I am fully. It looks like I've tried all these different careers and they don't even connect, but they do. There's a common thread for all of us. Maybe it's serving others. Maybe it's research. Maybe it's interest in patterns, and our threads take on different forms. So for me, I started as a marriage and family therapist. Then I went on to holistic personal training and teaching yoga. And then I went into therapeutic comedy and motherhood and coaching. The common thread for me is nurturing people. It looks different on my resume. It looks like I've had 5 different careers and moved 20 times because of ADHD, right? But there's common threads throughout. So I just want to keep going back to that being a strength, not a disadvantage, and something somebody reading a resume might look at and say, oh, interesting, this person has a common thread, and they've been so creative and innovative in how they have created new form around that common thread. So I really want to keep that in the conversation as much as possible. Movement is not just fun and games, but critical for anyone with excess energy. So lots of neurodivergent people have that hyperactivity in their mind internally, or externally, it needs to go somewhere. So workplaces can have a game room, treadmill, walking desks, balance balls to sit on, fidget spinners in a basket at the table, or just being open to the fact that somebody might bring in. I have usually a hair tie available that I'll pull. You might have somebody who has a fidget ring, or somebody who needs to do something with their hands, or sit or stand or move around. Just being open to this being a fully accepted and celebrated way of being in the workplace, knowing that movement is critical, and inviting that into the daily routine in the workplace, and encouraging it, and helping people to create boundaries around that, so that they make sure they create time without shame, without judgment, without worry that they're going to get fired, without worry that they're going to be misunderstood. If somebody needs to go outside and take a walk around the block, that could help them come back far more focused, engaged, loyal, productive, all the things businesses might care about, but really mentally healthy, feeling a sense of safety and belonging, and that somebody cared about them as a whole person, not just their productivity. Very important. Focusing on strengths and what people can do, of course, and not just our deficits and the disorders and the disabilities and the dysphorias and all the words that often start with D. Focus on how can we support you? How can we create an environment that allows your brilliant, nuanced, unique brain, mind, body to feel so at ease and so comfortable that you can expand and thrive, and starting a conversation that's so much more about curiosity and expansion, and not so much about labels and stigmas and stereotypes and fears. And then interestingly enough, a lot of people don't know their neurotype. Some people may never know their neurotype. Estimates suggest that as many as 75% of ADHDers may not be conscious of their ADHD, with significant negative implications for mental health and career outcomes. That's a quote by Dr. Edward Hollowell. So people might struggle and not know how to advocate for their needs. And this is true for neurodivergent and neurotypical people. I'll just say, like, everybody. Like, we might not understand how we think and work and love and live until we start really exploring it and having safe spaces to explore it. So often we don't even know what accommodations we need. So if workplaces and home can be a place where we can explore, where there's neuro inclusion, where there's a conversation, a safe conversation around what you want, what works well for you, what you need, how can I best support you, how can we as a company best support you. That's going to allow a lot more ease and creativity. It's going to allow people to thrive. So everybody recognizing that they work in neurodiverse organizations, and therefore bringing sensitivity, empathy, and curiosity to all daily interactions for all people. So I'm curious, and offering as an invitation as we conclude, what action will you take towards neuro-inclusion, neurodiversity-affirming practices and attitudes at work or at home, maybe today or maybe this week? How can you bring some of these concepts into your daily life? Thank you. I don't know how to stop sharing my screen so I can just talk to you all. But I'm done. I can't hear Letitia, but I think she's talking. Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you so much for your talk. Really interesting. Thank you so much. I didn't know about neurotype, so thank you. Any questions? I check.
We're just going to double check all our platforms. Right. Mm-hmm. Next stage, right stage. Um, okay, I don't see any questions at the moment in our chat, but Pasha, you're joining us for the panel discussion as well. So we're going back to a very exciting conversation. It just in some very short period of time. And again, you still have a chance to submit your questions to a panel discussion. We already got a couple of quite interesting things to discuss that we received from our audience. And yeah, again, we encourage you to share more. And thank you so much, Pasha, for sharing all your insights, your approach, and again, there were so many unique aspects. Like people are talking about, we would say like something very similar, something that we all share, but every perspective is so different. Everyone shares something so valuable that we'll be like, oh wow, I never thought about this. Like even though we're living with this, like this is part of who we are, and yeah, it's absolutely. Yeah, I would say it helps us to come to everything with open mind. The empathy part is incredibly important, and we just hope that again in the workplace this is something that is going to change at some point. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't raise all these questions, it's never going to happen. So this is why thank you so much for being part of it and for raising all these important questions and topics. Yeah, we got a question. Yes, please, Liz.
So I was thinking, so the neurodiversity, how we talk, or if people doesn't know us or doesn't know the person who has any neurodiversity, could affect to the communication, right, or relationships. Any advice how we can, improve? And some people probably doesn't want to say, oh, hello, I have this. Just
Yeah.
like they want to improve the communication, but they don't want to share their
diagnosis. Yeah, I think often we don't want to or don't need to share our neurotype or diagnosis at all. I think sometimes I'll enter a conversation saying, this, you know how I think or learn, or you know how I love, and I'll say it's really interesting. My sensitivity right now is these lights are making it hard for me to concentrate, or I'd love to go to the concert with you, but I get anxious around large crowds, or I'd love to go to that work event, but I'm not comfortable in that particular environment. So this is how I learn best. This is how I feel most comfortable moving my body best. And so just using language that everybody would understand more. And then one thing I would say I forgot to say is access intimacy. When we share our needs, our desires, our accommodations, it allows the other person to feel safer and more liberated to share their own. Neurotypicals and neurodivergent people. So if we say, I'd really be more comfortable sitting over there, somebody's like, oh, thank you for saying that, because the sound of the fan or that light was bothering me. Like, thank you. I'm so glad you said, let's move. I would love to move and I need to get some water. Oh, good. I need to use the bathroom. And you'll start to see that happen where once you share, somebody else feels more comfortable sharing, but using language that everybody understands. I agree. Rather than saying, I have this, and this, somebody might not understand what that means, but using I learn, I love, I move, I care, I feel, words that most people would understand help.
Thanks. What I see around is we lost our talking or our communication properly. Now it's just give me this, give me that, or I think slowly now after the pandemic we have to improve the communication somehow. I think slowly, but still people, they don't used to share anything.
Yeah.
But later they send you really hard message, and the communication is really hard, and you don't want to say, hey, hello, I have this.
Yeah. I agree.
He told me like in his job, people is putting in their signature, look, I am this, or he told me like, just put in your signature, you are dyslexic, and it's like, what am I gonna do with that?
Right. They might not even understand what that means. I think you're
exactly.
Right.
Or why they are saying that thing.
Yeah. And you're right. Given the pandemic, like collectively, the whole world has experienced trauma and transition over the past few years. So if we come with that sensitivity that we're all feeling lack of stability and safety, and we're all feeling this uncertainty still, and we're all just starting to reconnect and reinvent ourselves and reframe old structures and learn to human again. You know, if we come in with that sensitivity, hopefully there'll be a little bit more softness and gentleness, empathy, and patience.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Pasha, and especially like using the language. I would say that I can totally relate, because the moment when you learn about your neurodiversity, like that, how you're neurodivergent, the whole thing, you start researching, you just go into all the terms, you're nerding about it. Like, okay, this is the rejection sensitivity dysphoria, this is that, this is executive dysfunctioning, functioning, and you're getting so almost ready to do to write a dissertation about the whole thing. You start using this terminology, like, and trying to communicate it sometimes to people and saying, no, that's not me, but I have this problem which is called like executive dysfunctioning, and this is why this is leads to time blindness, and I have another. Look at you like, what language are you speaking? Like, what are you talking about? But we are getting so excited learning these words, because oh wow, this explains everything.
It explains it, yeah. And it's so important what you're saying, because we do, as neurodivergent people, often research far more than maybe even some of the doctors or therapists, coaches, experts that we meet. That's why I think we need to honor lived experience and self-diagnosis. You've already done so much research on your brain, on your neurotype. And so I think that is often overlooked, how much just we naturally dive in to understanding ourselves. And we have a deep sense of knowing about ourselves and curiosity, and that the 20 questionnaire or the 1 or 2 hour questionnaire really doesn't touch the probably hours, days, middle of the night research that we do about ourselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. But well, it's just now our task is to communicate it in an easy way to understand, so that to find the language that we can share with everybody, like, so that we can exactly not just throw the terms, but actually, communicate our needs and wants, like, in a easier to understand. It's super important. Thank you so much for highlighting this, and thanks a lot again for sharing all your insights. And yeah, we are looking forward to see you back in our panel discussion.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.